Jewish Channel's Week in Review. The president meets with the president of the Palestinian Authority, Jewish Rockets, a woman unable to remarry on the eve of her husband's wedding to someone else, and more of the Jewish news that's changing our world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. President Barack Obama and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas met this week in the White House's Oval Office. The meeting comes soon after Obama's recent meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. Here's some of what the president had to say.
And I have to commend President Abbas. He has been somebody who has consistently renounced violence, has consistently sought a diplomatic and peaceful solution that allows for two states side by side in peace and security. A state that allows for the dignity and sovereignty of the Palestinian people, and a state that allows for Israelis to feel secure and at peace with their neighbors. This is obviously an elusive goal, and there's a reason why it's taken decades for us to even get to the point where we are now. But we remain convinced that there is an opportunity, and I think everybody understands the outlines of what a peace deal would look like, involving a territorial compromise on both sides based on 67 lines with mutually agreed upon swaps that would ensure that Israel was secure, but would also ensure that the Palestinians have a sovereign state in which they can achieve the aspirations that they've held for so long.
Abbas also spoke of a peace deal in his response.
أنا أؤكد ما قلتموه سيادة الرئيس حول العمل من أجل حل قائم على أساس الشرعية الدولية، قائم على أساس 1967 حدود 67 ليحصل الفلسطينيون على دولتهم المستقلة هناك وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية، وحل عادل ومتفق عليه لقضية اللاجئين. ليس لدينا الوقت لنضيعه، الوقت ضيق جدا، خاصة وأننا نعيش في الشرق الأوسط في ظروف صعبة للغاية في محيطنا. نأمل أن نستغل وأن تستغل هذه الفرصة للوصول إلى سلام.
Meanwhile, the dialogue between the U.S. and Israel got quite a lot more frank this week, with controversial comments from Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Yaalon. In a lecture delivered at Tel Aviv University, Yaalon accused the U.S. of, quote, showing weakness on the international front. He cited specifically recent U.S. inaction in Ukraine and seemed to suggest such weakness could be seen in the Middle East as well. He criticized the U.S. approach to Iran, saying, quote, we had thought the ones who should lead the campaign against Iran is the United States, but at some stage the United States entered into negotiations with them, and unhappily, when it comes to negotiating at a Persian bazaar, the Iranians were better. Yaalon then spoke directly to the idea of Israel acting alone in Iran, saying, quote, therefore, on this matter, we have to behave as though we have nobody to look out for us but ourselves. Yaalon also spoke of a visit to Asia in which he heard, quote, disappointment about China getting stronger and the U.S. getting weaker. Yaalon added, quote, nobody will replace the United States as global policeman. I hope the United States comes to its senses. If it doesn't, it will challenge the world order, and the United States is the one that will suffer. Of course, when it comes to Israel going it alone on the international stage, the Israel Defense Forces needs help not just from the United States, but from its own people. And the fight over the ultra-Orthodox being drafted into the Israeli military continues to play out. A young man was arrested Monday night for draft dodging and has been sentenced to 10 days in a military prison. Ultra-Orthodox leaders are planning nationwide protests in Israel in response. The young man is Yaakov Yisrael Paz, who was stopped by police for being intoxicated around the holiday of Purim. A check on Paz showed he was AWOL, whereupon he was delivered to military police, and a military judge ordered him jailed just hours later. Paz was perhaps responding to orders from ultra-Orthodox leaders to ignore draft notices. He reportedly had received 2 draft notices and had failed to respond. But as with last week's large protest in New York, ultra-Orthodox groups continue to press their case against Israel's military draft with actions here in the United States. This week, a group called True Torah Jews aired an advertisement on ABC radio in New York, attacking the Israeli government's policies and the very legitimacy of a Jewish state. Here's the ad they ran repeatedly on broadcast radio.
Very recently, hundreds of thousands of Orthodox Jews across the globe have openly expressed their pain at the Israeli government. The Israeli government's plan to draft Orthodox Jews is a direct attack on their freedom of religion. Clearly, one goal of the draft is to fulfill the longtime Zionist dream to transform Torah Judaism into nationalism. Furthermore, ever since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago, God has commanded the Jewish people not to establish a Jewish army and fight wars against other nations, only to wait for divine redemption. The draft will force the Orthodox to violate their very conscience and most fundamental religious principles. How ironic that the so-called Jewish state has become the most difficult place for Orthodox Jews to practice Judaism. American Jewry will not tolerate such injustice. For more information, visit TrueTorahJews.org.
The fight between Jews over these and so many other issues is likely to lead to the spouting of obscenities. Appropriately, a new study of obscenities in Jewish culture is out, and Christian Needon has that story.
The prophet Isaiah said many things, but his thoughts on obscenity are the inspiration for the title of a new book by English professor and Tablet magazine contributing editor Josh Lambert.
Isaiah has his calling as a prophet, and he says, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but woe is me, for I am a man of unclean lips, living among a people of unclean lips.
Unclean Lips, Obscenity, Jews, and American Culture, out now from NYU Press, covers a century's worth of legal fights over the issue of what qualifies as obscenity, which Lambert points out is one of the few exceptions to the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment guarantee of free speech.
Libel is an exception that we all know about. There's an exception called fighting words, which is an exception to free speech. And obscenity still, to this day, is an exception to free speech. And there are people in jail in America right now, as we speak, who are in jail for obscenity because they produced cultural materials that the courts have deemed obscene.
Lambert noted that a number of American Jews have done time for landmark obscenity cases, but that they were far too diverse a group for that to say something definitive about the culture that produced them.
They were rich and poor, they were Yiddish-speaking and German-speaking. They had very different ideas about religion, about their bodies, about history. And so what we have to do if we want to understand obscenity is look at particular moments or particular communities or particular people and try to understand how Jewishness played itself out in the field of obscenity.
One cultural moment Lambert explores is New York City in the 1930s.
Virtually everyone being arrested in New York City for obscenity is marked down as Jewish. And it's really quite an incredible thing. Now, one wants to understand this and think about, why would that be the case? One explanation for it is simply that in the period of obscenity and anti-vice activism, where the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice is sort of dominant from the 1890s into the 30s, they knew, as well as anybody else, that a wealthy, well-off Protestant citizen who had good connections through society would be a tough prosecution, but a poor Jewish immigrant who had bad connections and didn't know enough people was the perfect kind of person to string up on obscenity charges, make a big splash in the newspaper, and throw in jail.
To hear more from Josh Lambert about his new book, Unclean Lips, Obscenity, Jews, and American Culture, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. We've all seen the Rockettes do their high kicks in one forum or another. But what happens when that high stepping comes home to the Shabbos table? Meredith Gansman reports on some Jewish Rockette.
I'm here at Radio City Music Hall, where the Rockettes are debuting a brand new show later this month, and I got to speak with a few Jewish women on the line. Since 1932, the Radio City Christmas Spectacular, starring the world-famous Rockettes, has entertained audiences during the holiday season. But now, there's a new show, Heart and Lights, a tour of New York City on the stage of Radio City. Jewish Rockettes Alyssa Epstein and Nicole Baker met with me in between rehearsals for the high-tech production, which features 3D effects and animatronics, plus new choreography by Linda Haberman.
It's more athletic, it's more demanding. We really get to show our range as dancers.
Now in their 8th season with the company, Baker and Epstein, like all of their fellow Rockettes, still have to audition at the beginning of every season. But as Jewish Rockettes, keeping their spot on the line is not the only challenge they face. The rigorous rehearsal and show schedule often forces them to miss Jewish holidays.
Sometimes the high holy days fall within our rehearsal periods, so I don't always get to go home, but I'll always get to go to like maybe a friend's house in the city, and I'll FaceTime in with my family.
Religious observance isn't only an issue for Jewish Rockettes.
We perform on Christmas and Thanksgiving, so we miss some of our holidays, but then a lot of the other women are missing their holidays as well.
Such dedication is required in order to achieve the Rockettes' signature style, known as precision dance, in which 36 individual women appear to move as one. The executive producer of the recent production, A Salute to Rockette History, Mark York, says the precision effect brings audiences to their feet.
When you're sitting in Radio City Music Hall and those 36 ladies go into what we call fan kicks, all in precision, it's a religious experience.
But when it comes to experiencing the divine at Radio City Music Hall, it's not always about the kicking. Rhonda Kaufman-Malkin danced with the Radio City Rockettes from 2001 to 2012. An Orthodox Jew, sometimes she had to bring her religious observance to work.
There were times that I had to daven at Radio City Music Hall, and dressers would look over my shoulder and say, must be a good book.
For more on Heart and Lights, which runs at Radio City Music Hall from March 27th to May 4th, and to hear more from Jewish Rockette alumna Rhonda Malkin, watch the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, one of the most shocking stories of an Orthodox Jewish woman chained in her marriage is told for the first time on the Jewish Channel this week. By the time this interview airs, the ex-husband of Lana Kin is likely to be married to another woman, while Lana herself is still considered married to him under Orthodox Jewish doctrine. My interview with Lana Kin is part of this week's episode of Up Close. Also on Up Close, why do bad things happen to good people? And why do bad things happen at all? Stony Brook University professor Andrew Michael Flesher's book on the topic last month won the Prose Award for Excellence in Theology and Religion. He stopped by to talk about that book, Moral Evil. But now, here are some of the highlights of my interview with Lana Kin. So you have your civil divorce as of, I believe, 2007. Right. And custody matters and alimony and so forth have all been settled within the civil divorce proceeding. The only thing that remains is that, according to Orthodox religious law and custom, he would need to give you a get in order for you to be able to freely marry someone else within the Orthodox world. And he hasn't done that.
Right.
And now he's going to be remarried, and you would still be without one of these gifts.
Right, but you asked me how this happened, how this got this far. What he did was he claims to have deposited a get in escrow with a Rabbi Abraham, a Beis Din that has 3 rabbis on it: Rabbi Abraham, Gestetner, and Blumenkrantz. But this get is a get is supposed to be unconditional. And this get is conditional upon extreme extortion of an extremely high amounts of money. He's asking me for $500,000, and I have to sign an arbitration with these rabbis, an arbitration agreement which would reverse custody. We have 1 child from this marriage. That's our son Moshe. He's 12 years old now. I would have had to sign an arbitration agreement and lose custody of our son, and I was awarded custody in court. But the rabbi, this Rabbi Abraham and these other rabbis have a very bad reputation. First of all, and if I would pick up a get that these rabbis are holding, supposedly, which is a conditional one, so it doesn't really have any value, it would be not valid on its face. Regardless, I have documentation to show that no other acceptable Orthodox rabbi will accept the get anyway. In other words, they won't accept their heter mea rabbanan anyway.
Right. It has to be so that the Beit Din that he has reached out to, the rabbinical court that he has reached out to resolve this from his side, is one that appears to be, in the eyes of almost the entire global Orthodox rabbinate, entirely discredited. And I should mention here, by the way, we have reached out to your husband for comment, and he has not responded. And what you're saying right now is that the get, which is simply it's like a pro forma divorce document, the idea that this formally ends the marriage. He hands it to you, it's done, or he hands it to a messenger, and the messenger hands it to you. And then the marriage is dissolved, that this pro forma aspect, which has the ability to keep women chained into a marriage, is being used to reopen, or in the hope on his part of reopening, the entire divorce proceeding that you've already gone through.
Correct.
What does it feel like for you to be in this situation?
Well, I was really obviously very upset because this has been going on for 10 years. I'm in the 10th year without a get. On Hanukkah time it will be 10 years. And he is doing everything he can to prevent me from having this get. And it's very painful because he can move on with his life. He can date. He's having intimate relationships. He can, getting married, which is outrageous.
Married, yeah. Moving on in the most direct sense, yeah.
That's right. And I am a religious woman. I don't even date. I work and I take care of my children.
What is the impact of this on your child?
It's not only, it's extremely taxing and difficult for our son, and also for my other children. I have 5 children total. I have 4 children from a previous marriage and 1 from this marriage. And I cannot have a normal, I do my best to raise my children and give them love, and I run a real estate company, so I'm a busy person. I show them some semblance of normalcy. I take them on trips. I'm very close with my parents who live in California, and with my siblings, one brother that lives in Israel. We go back and forth. I try to keep them close with cousins, but it's not the same. I can't show them what it's like to have a normal, healthy relationship, a normal marriage with a normal, healthy relationship, because for so many years, I raised these children without a husband.
I thought it was interesting, before we started shooting this interview, you were asking me almost, why are you here, in the sense of like, why is this something that the Jewish channel cares about? Is your sense that most of the community doesn't want to pay attention to this?
Yes. I think that in the Orthodox community, many people think that if someone gets divorced, that they just don't know how to handle a relationship. They don't understand the depth of abusive relationships, controlling relationships, and all those interdynamics. And I think people should be more educated.
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast, available on iTunes or in your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish channel, be well. Jewish channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and on Comcast in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.